One. We are live now.
Hi guys, good evening to all of you, and I warmly welcome Mr. Vasudev ji, who is here. Uh, on the World Yoga Day, 21st June is a World Yoga Day, and over the last about 7, 8 odd years, ever since Narendra Modi ji has become our Prime Minister, the World Yoga Day has become very dominant. We cannot get over the image of Narendra Modi ji leading the entire nation doing an asana, lying down prone on the floor. It was such a great sight. And ever since then, yoga has got such a lot of international attraction. So we thought we'll shift the Monday motivation to Wednesday because it has fallen on Wednesday, the World Yoga Day. And as usual, I'll take the support of the PowerPoint and I'll introduce our speaker and his book to you. Just a second as I load this PowerPoint. Okay. So, Vasudev ji, is this PPT visible?
Not yet.
Well, it's visible to me.
Chale, koi baat nahi. Then there must be some reason I'm not.
Rishi, is it seen? Rishi seems to have gone.
No, I doubt it's seen. If I can't see it, I don't think he will see it either.
Just a second. Let's get this. So I'll go to share screen and then.
There we go. Kuch ho
I
raha hai.
think now we are okay, right?
Yes, very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is how the book looks, about which we are going to be talking. And the book is on Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And who is Vasudev ji? So he's a prolific author. He's written 8 books on very diverse topics: music, management, crime, spirituality. I leave it to you guys to get a common link between the 4. And Patanjali Yoga Sutra is a very complex Sanskrit text, and he has tried to make it very easily accessible to all of us. His books have been translated in Japanese, Kannada, and Hindi. He is an avid violin player, an avid animal rights activist. He's a professor and is a professional management consultant. It's not that he alone has written a text on Patanjali Yoga Sutras in English. You can do a Google search and you can find that various religious leaders like Swami Sachidanand, various other authors, as mentioned, Desi Kachar, Edwin Bryant, Pandit Rajmani Tingunait, and of course, our own dear Art of Living Guruji Sri Ravi Shankar. They have all authored books on Patanjali Yoga Sutras. However, the difference is that he's a corporate person. He thinks and behaves like us. So he's written in a language which we'll all be able to identify with. What is this book all about? He's obviously going to tell us in great detail. However, I must tell you that it's written in 196 sutras divided over 4 chapters. The chapters are titled Samadhi, Sadhana, Vibhuti, and Kevalya. So it's in incremental order of reaching the divine. It deals with body, mind, and ego, which we'll be explaining to you gradually as the session progresses. And essentially, the core of it is ethical living along with spiritual growth. So who was Patanjali, right? He was a revered sage. This book is written around 2nd century BC. He was a prolific scholar, and his guidance is primarily on yoga and path of self-realization. So you will wonder, why are we talking about such a heavy topic on a 9 to 10 session midweek? So we are going to convert this entire conversation to help us make more successful, help us deal with our common day-to-day problems, help us remain in peace and have a good health, help us deal with our competition better, and help us deal with our family and staff matters better. So with that, how the process will be, I'll just stop sharing. Okay, so the process will be that Vasudev ji will talk a brief about Patanjali Yoga Sutras and his book, and then we'll take some question answer sessions, and guys who are online can always approach us, and please be free to share with your questions. So over to you, Vasudev ji.
Thank you, Dr. Tushar. It's very nice of you to invite me. I appreciate it. And whoever's going to be looking at the video, my namaskar to you. This is actually, you mentioned so many wonderful names over there. And I want to actually start from there. As you can see, and you already made a passing reference, I'm really more of a corporate kind of a guy. I'm not a guy with Swamiji, so I don't have a name like Swami Vasudevanand or anything like that. So the approach of the book has been in that specific way of an explorer. In fact, I've mentioned it here, soul searching adventure with Patanjali. So I've taken it in that sense. I do not believe that I'm personally spiritually gifted or something like that. I'm not of that caliber. But the question is, can Patanjali's Yoga Sutras demonstrate their relevance to an Aam Aadmi? And I would consider myself an Aam Aadmi, who you can find walking on the streets of Bangalore. So it's the same thing. How does that make sense? And I've tried, therefore, to make sense of it from those eyes. Now, if you look at Patanjali himself, as you mentioned, we're talking about something which is at least 2,000 years old, at least so far as we know. There are lots of wonderful, beautiful myths. Our myths are really so remarkable of how he fell from the skies, and he fell into the hands of a yogini who was about to pass away. And then she adopted him as a son. She taught him the philosophy of yoga. Then that I'm told what happened in the Himalayas. It depends. I don't have a specific confirmed reference for that. But then he came down to Chidambaram, which is near Pondicherry, south of Chennai. And that's where he saw Shiva and Parvati dance. And that's where he also taught a whole lot of people the philosophy of yoga. And then most of Tamil Nadu, lots of interesting, stories and anecdotes are about. He had a different name in Tamil Nadu somehow. Lots of villages and pockets have some reference to Patanjali in their little old, ancient temple, ruined temples. He's supposed to have finally vanished in Rameshwaram, right? So now, to your point, it is not only a matter of yogic philosophy. He's also, as you obviously know, he was a master of Sanskrit grammar and Ayurveda, which explains Baba Ramdev's Patanjali. So he was like, all things to all people. He was obviously an extremely gifted individual. In our lore, in our stories, he's depicted as half man, half snake. Okay, to show his origins from Adi Shesha, which he fell from the heavens and so on. In the traditions of Tamil literature and Tamil spirituality, there's a term called Siddha, self-realized souls. He is number 3 mentioned in that order, if I remember correctly, out of about 18. So his impact, now the way I look at it, and I'm going to make a very strong statement here. As I think you and I will agree, somehow the past several years, there's been a kind of a revival, not just about the practice of yoga as in the visible angle of it, but a sense of pride of our culture. I don't know whether you agree with me, but this is my opinion. Somehow, a lot of people have become suddenly cognizant of the great heritage that we have been lucky enough to actually receive, right? And I will talk about that a little later as well. So in that sense, I would like to say that, the Yoga Sutras, of course, we have the Vedas, we have this and that, no doubt. But I feel that the Yoga Sutras are one of the greatest foundational texts of our civilization, because it seems to have an apex of explaining why we are here to begin with, when we all know we are going to die. So what is the fun in spending these 70, 80, 90 years over here? What does it all mean? So he's gone into great depth. This is a story that all mankind through the centuries has been grappling with. He has answered it as well as we can understand it. It's probably even more incomprehensible in different ways. But what I mean is that the contribution of Patanjali to the sense of what it means to be an Indian. Now, you mentioned, past 7 years, International Day of Yoga. Even today, Dr. Tushar, as you have seen, Prime Minister Modi actually is probably doing, as we speak, a yoga session at United Nations. So we're talking about, it's one of the strongest soft powers of Indian diplomacy. And I think a lot of people are very, very appreciative of it. I mean, you know how it is. People outside, dur ke dhol suhavne is one way of putting it. But as you know, people outside find this much more interesting, and many of them are great adepts at it than us. Our own people are cynical about it. They think, kya fayda, etc. But the people who want to know, are they getting it? And now I'm happy to say, I think generally speaking, there's a revival, especially because the International Day of Yoga, etc. So the whole thing has started gaining momentum. So, I think we are at a very good time in that sense that, people are appreciating. So when I speak to individuals like you, one of the common things is, how is it relevant today? And of course, as I hope to talk about it, it is indeed relevant. So now stepping back to me, you're welcome to stop me at any time, by the way. I have a habit of talking a lot. So as you mentioned, this is my 8th book. And the question is, how did I end up writing this book? Right? Now, my initial books was actually in classical music and, of course, a management thing, and about crime and so on. And then the 7th book was actually was what we call was on humor, which I haven't mentioned there. It was a satire on the world of publishing. So I've written a lot, and in the process, I have gotten to know lots of editors and publishers. Because you normally meet them in literary festivals and so on, and then it works out, and you become friends with them. So the publisher in this case, JECO, it was a gentleman called Akash Shah. Akash Shah one day called me during the pandemic time, and he said, I know you because I'm aware of your interest in yoga. I mean, I do hatha yoga every single day, 1.5 hours. Jo bhi hai karna hai, especially when I don't want to do it. That's exactly when I do it. I spend even more time. So the question of battling the mind, which is what this is all about. So he and I know each other, acquainted, and he said he wants an interpretation of this book, which is for the mass market. The mass market should not be construed as something silly or immature, or they don't get it, or we shouldn't look down upon them. Not at all. The question here is, how can a normal person make sense of our wonderful classical texts? And I'll come back to this point because it's a very significant point. And so I said, okay, now I've reached a stage where if such opportunities come, I grab it and ask questions later, because I know there's a reason for this and I want to find out what it is about. Because I can't say at that time that I was really very fluent in the Yoga Sutras. That's also not true. But I had read it, but had not read it to the extent of wanting to reinterpret it. So I had an editor who was assigned to me, a very fine lady. And then we worked on, she said, okay, let's try it. So I did the first round, rejected. Second round, rejected. And then we hit the magical formula the third time. So what is this formula? The formula here is, and something to think about for all our wonderful classical texts, and you listed some 4 or 5 people. You also missed, I think, B.K.S. Iyengar, but there's so many other people as well. Many people have written. If you go back to the way the Patanjali Yoga Sutras have been talked about, and not just the Yoga Sutras, but practically every classical text, Bhagavad Gita, whatever it is, Rig Vedas, it goes like this. Line 1, Devanagari mein, Sanskrit mein, Arthat. और फिर अंग्रेजी में, for English they describe talk, ये हुआ वो हुआ, इसका ये मतलब है उसके. फिर next shloka number 2, Devanagari, or Sanskrit में Arthat. So basically this is the typical flow of all these great texts with almost no exception. There's nothing wrong with it. This is the way it is done in a very orthodox and very, very intelligent way by people who are much smarter than me in all possible ways. But the difficulty with this approach is as follows. It may presuppose that the person knows Devanagari or Sanskrit. It might. Or even if it's not the case, it acts as an immediate mental stumbling block for someone reading these texts. Ki yaar, mere ko pata hi nahi, I don't understand ki ye kya hai, and I hope I'm not missing something. So therefore, even with good intentions, when you try to read these wonderful texts, you somehow get the feeling that this is hamare bas ki baat nahi hai. And then you take the book and put it in a bookshelf, thinking कि एक time आएगा, मैं फिर से बाद में अगले महीने, अगले साल, 10 साल के बाद, we'll come back to it and start reading. And also, so these things are also peppered with allusions to other kinds of classical texts, right? So therefore, if you don't have that kind of depth, you're not likely to make a lot of sense out of it. And most of these great books are on bookshelves and they're not really read very well. This is my way of looking at it. So what we have done with this book was make it more of a conversation, use graphics, because graphics is a great way of communicating. So lots of graphics there to explain how these ideas come about. And then we have taken the Devanagari and Sanskrit to the very end, as you must have seen, so that it doesn't act as a stumbling block for the reading process.
So
right? And as
the charts and the diagrams which you have created are your own, or
yes, they're my own. And of course, I got it done, but they're my own. Yeah, correct. Yeah. Because you see, so this is a great point. So all those 196 sutras have been taken to the appendix. So अगर किसी को really पढ़ना है संस्कृत में, they can always go and look at it. But during the reading process, you are not disturbed. You are not, बीच में एक गड्ढा ना हो. That kind of idea. Now, you think about it. When people write, let's say Dr. Tushar Agarwal writes a textbook on orthopedic practices. I'm just taking an example, right? So basically, it is an expression of your knowledge in this area, experience, etc., right? And that's perfectly fine. That's how most people write books. But what has to now also enter the whole equation is who is the reader and how does a reader consume that information? That is a significant thing that a large number of writers don't get. Okay, so they say, "Arey, it's my own intellectual, free-flowing thoughts. Mera ye idea hai, wo idea. Samajh aaye, na samajh aaye, it's not my problem at all." I mean, obviously, I'm being a little facetious and exaggerating, but I think you understand what I mean. So the question here is the physiology not physiology, the psychological. What is that reader going through while reading a book? So the following things are true. A reader likes white space. He wants spaces, shorter paragraphs. He wants graphics to relieve the monotony. He wants shorter sentences. He wants bigger fonts. In fact, he wants cursive fonts. So there's a great deal of analysis of how people read. Okay. So if you insist on projecting your knowledge in massive 2-page, 3-page paragraphs, the reader, and it might have important information, the reader is going to find some way to skip and go to the very end. So, there are studies like this. So therefore, this is what we have tried to do over here is use diagrams to give white space, have shorter paragraphs, you would have noticed. And also, as you said, in the contemporary age, the issue is, for example, why would anyone look at this video, which we're making right now? And they're going to say, what is my takeaway? That's the term we all use. Is meeting ka takeaway kya hai? Right? So in that same spirit, because we are men of the world right now, so we see at the end, there are 3 takeaways that you would have noticed after everything, because every chapter, there are 8 chapters. So there are 3. So at least okay, this is the sum and substance about it. So that is the approach that has been taken in this particular book. And of course, I peppered it with my own allusions to my own life and also of an imperfect person. I'm not saying I'm Swami Vasudevanand. I'm just saying that I am VASUDEV MURTHY. किसी भी coffee के दुकान पे in Bangalore, you'll find me having coffee. I mean, that is the basic idea. बोलिए.
So 2 questions which immediately come to my mind.
Please.
Why did you choose Patanjali Yoga Sutras? And
well,
number two, after having gone through the whole thing, can you tell me just one major transformation your own research and publishing this book has brought about in your personal life?
Certainly. I will definitely do that. That's a brilliant question. Now, the question of Patanjali Yoga Sutra. First of all, I have been doing the conventional yoga, as I mentioned to you earlier, for the past 20, 30, 40 years. Okay. And with various periods of extreme focus and sometimes nahi hota, etc. But in the past several years, it's been going clockwork day after day after day. But to be perfectly honest, I have been doing it only from the limited view of trying to keep fit. And it has worked by and large. Right. So the suggestion was not mine. The suggestion was the publisher. The publisher said there is a need for a fresh interpretation of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras for the mass market, and we feel that you can do it. So, like I said, right, if such an opportunity comes, you don't say, "Nahi, mere bas ki baat hai." You say, "I will take it and I'll figure out ho sakta hai nahi." And I was successful because I had a very good editor from Jaipur who made it happen. Right. So that's what I'm saying. It was looking at it from the point of view of a wide-eyed kind of imperfect person trying to make sense of a great text. So that way, I hope you'll find the tone is like that. It is not trying to say, mere paas jyada vidya hai or aisi baat to hai nahi. And your second question, the great question, please remind me again, what was it? Aapka second question.
It was saying that what one major
Yes. Yeah. So the one major shift, because by the way, these are 196 lines, and as you said, it's dense. It's actually dense in the sense that compressing major ideas, significant ideas into a single line is exhausting to the mind to understand, arthat, so many things. Each line can give rise to a PhD in the sense of interpretation. So obviously along the way, there were many times where I actually had to stop because I couldn't understand. I just couldn't understand. Luckily, I had some basic knowledge of Sanskrit, which is not enough. And then I had all these books, many of the ones you referred to. I had the Hindis, I had the English, various from Edwin Bryant to B.K. Sayangar, from Yogacharya Bhavnani. So all these people had been writing, and incidentally, all the interpretations are not exactly the same. There's always a minute, thoda sa yahan 19-20 ka farak hai. So then for example, the idea of time. What is time? My God, it really threw me off what he had to say about it. And I couldn't wrap my head around that. It was a showstopper for some time. I really thought, can I actually do it? Anyway, I actually did it. Now, going back to a very important question. You see, many of the terms that we in modern urban Indians, let me just take the liberty of including you in that set, like me, you're in an urban setting. We we have a lot of management terms that come along our way, right? One important one is emotional intelligence. This particular term, Dr. Tushar, you have probably been hearing for the good 15 years as my guess. I don't know. But we normally take all these Porter's ka ye model, kahi ka management, all these Western concepts are thrown at us and we happily absorb them and we retransmit them. In fact, I still do it because I'm a management consultant. I do management workshops. So even though I've been trying to do indic-oriented management workshops, it hasn't really taken off very well yet because people are still have a slight subservience to Western thought.
lingo.
But Western lingo, we have to deal with it. Shayad dheere dheere change ho jayega. But to your point about emotional intelligence, you see his first sentence over here, and I will take the liberty of reading it out for you. He starts like this. Okay, yogas chitta vritti nirodha. That is the intent of yoga, which is yoga is the stilling of the mind. Now, two frameworks. One is, of course, the emotional intelligence part, and the other one I'll tell you in a moment. So what that does, as you start understanding more of what he's saying, is can you blank out your mind for even a microsecond or a second or a millisecond is practically impossible. The ability to be able to simply switch off and say, "Acha, main bhi 5 minute meditate karke wapas aunga." These things doesn't seem to work. It's the constant flux which is happening. In order to be able to deal with that flux, you have to understand why it's happening. So he starts then by explaining what are the 5 causes for the mind to be disturbed and so on and so forth. Very, very beautiful, beautiful terms. But basically, along the way, he essentially says that whatever you are seeing, sensing, experiencing is nothing but an affirmation of your ego, because the 5 sense organs keep on reaffirming to you your sense of identity. Ki main VASUDEV MURTHY hu, or I am Dr. Tushar. That is what is defining me again and again. So, but actually it's a kind of, Maya Jal. It's actually an illusion is what it is. Now, in that context, therefore, my ability to respond instinctively, or rather reflexively, that's a better word. My reflex action has decreased considerably after really getting deep into this book, which was your question, right? Because you see that...
So now you are more keen to respond rather than react.
That's correct. That's absolutely right. Now, remember, my other contexts actually pushed me towards reacting. What do I mean by that? I mean, I'm a teacher. I get lots of questions. I'm a musician, so I do a lot of music. So music is also stimulant to those kinds of forces which make you emotional, which make you feel love or pain or sorrow. Those are the things that are happening to me. So in spite of that, and I was a hot-headed young man. Let me be very clear. I was hot-headed. I would get into it without thinking. It was a matter of my pride, my ego, my youth, whatever it is, right?
You are impulsive.
Now I was. I think a lot of us are. It's just that, because again, it's a sense of identity, self-preservation, life, jo bhi kahe, what it is. And so if someone says something, wants to provoke you, I used to get provoked, right? So this ability to withstand provocation, I think, has significantly been better. So if I were to have an argument with you, for example, let's say you and I disagreed on a certain point, previously I might have continued the argument knowing fully well that there's no resolution because it's a matter of, main hoon. But I might in this case now say, okay, that's your view. So it has sobered me down at that level. I think it's a very good thing because you suddenly realize the futility of it all and why, and what you're doing is adding to your karmic baggage. But it's a very difficult battle. As I described it somewhere else as you take 2 steps forward and take 3 steps back. Because right now we're talking and we're discussing some very nice ideas. So you feel, acha, we have to control ourselves, the lagam mein rakhna vagara. Ab bahar drive kiya and some guy cuts me off with the traffic. You know what I mean? So immediately there's a thing, gadha, kya kar raha hai. So, and then I catch myself. So basically, I also am catching myself thinking or doing things which I ought not to.
I think the biggest impact has been in your EQ has gone up a lot.
I would hope so.
Researching on Patanjali Yoga. So that is what the audience can expect after reading the book. That if they are able to basically understand, get the gist of the book and apply some principles, their EQ will rise.
Right.
So in a way, it's in our day-to-day modern life, EQ seems to be the most important ingredient. Now, it's well proven that a person with equal IQ, but with a higher EQ is going to be more successful. Almost also a person with a lower IQ, but a higher EQ can be also more successful.
Can also be successful. If I were to look at your context, of which I don't know very much, I'm sorry, you please continue. You were saying something.
What I'll do is, right now we are at 9:26. So what I'll request you to do is, just very briefly, tell us what the whole text of Patanjali Yoga Sutra is.
Sure.
And then I'll start asking you the contextual questions to bring more out of the text.
Fine. So let's get very brief about it. Like I started by saying, he starts by saying, what is yoga? This is a very important point in the sense, conventionally.
So at this very point, so yoga means traditionally everybody thinks that it is exercises and meditation. So is it something other than exercises and meditation?
Much more so, but to say that it is meditation and exercises is not a wrong thing. Let's not be harsh about it. It is accepted. But it is a fraction of the overall yogic philosophy, which I will talk about. So again, going back, and I don't want me to be brief, but I may not be able to help it here. See, he starts with defining what is yoga. Yoga is the stilling of the mind. Keval exercise se nahi hoga. There's a lot more behind it, but he's saying that is what it is. Now, if you and I remember our school days when we were asked to write an essay, right? There was a conventional way in which we would write essays. Thoda background diya, fir kya hua, data kahan ka hai, and therefore global warming is going to destroy us. So there is a certain logic in which we used to write, and that's universally accepted. That's how you write essays or even books for that matter. There was a lady called Barbara Minto, who used to work for McKinsey. She created something called the pyramid principle of communication, which says, as in effect, get to the point first. CEOs don't have time for your long philosophy. If you really want to make a powerful statement, say it first. Agar you got the interest, they'll ask you additional questions and they'll show interest. Otherwise, if you keep on saying, "Pehle main background batata hu, fir ye hoga, they'll wo ghadi dekh ke wo bolenge main kuch nikalna hai yahan se." So this is Barbara Minto, and we all worship her in management school. But Patanjali was already talking about it right away. In the very first line of Yoga Sutra, he has not beaten around the bush. He says yoga is the stilling of the mind. Right? He could have waited for Sutra number 196 to tell us this. Acha, ye sab kehne ke baad, acha, pata laga ki aapko ki ye yoga hai. So anyway, how has he organized it? It's very important to understand. So they have four what they call padas. First one is called the Samadhi pada, where he describes the ultimate state of yoga, which is Samadhi, which is called the 8th limb of yoga, is called Samadhi, where you in effect merge or dissolve into nothingness, or essentially achieve, your life. When we loosely use the word moksha ho gaya, ye ho gaya, that is actually what we're talking about. Is just finally we dissolve into something much larger, right? So, the Samadhi Pada is about 51 or 52 sutras, which talks about the various kinds of Samadhi, the impediments to Samadhi, and how meditation is the right way to go forward. What should you meditate on, etc., etc., etc. Very beautifully described. अच्छा तो समाधि, अच्छा अब पता लगा आपको कि this is called Samadhi. But how do we achieve it? Sadhana Pada, the next chapter, about 55, 56 sutras, is called the Sadhana Pada. With sadhana, we understand what sadhana means. How do you actually go about it? So along the way, he says, what are the 5 sources of sorrow? Why do we feel sad? What creates the thing, including the fear of death, egoism? So it goes into some detail, but he starts talking about the 8 limbs of yoga. And in the Sadhana Pada, he talks about the first 5. What are the first 5? And this is worth talking about because, you're in a certain business, which will be not business, but I mean, your profession, where we need to understand this. The number 1 is yama, which is your outward behavior, how you behave with others, with society in general. Okay. What are the 3 or 4 or 5 principles by which, if you aspire to be a yoga, if you hope to reach samadhi, there are lots of ifs here, by the way. I'm not saying it's not for everyone, because some people may think it's useless. But if you claim that you are actually want to be a yogi, then you have to mellow your mind and attitude first. It's a structured way of doing it. Pehle, how do you deal with the outside world in terms of ahimsa, not being jealous, not being like this, so things like we might see in professional life. Then we're talking about niyama, or the things we live by. Not coveting stuff, and a lovely word which we all use all the time called santosha. Santosha means basically being satisfied with what you have, because it's always somebody else is having a greater time than you. So therefore, if you are in that path, if your emotional intelligence is not high enough to realize that if you are always admiring somebody else for what he has and what you don't have, you will never, ever, ever, ever be happy, because there'll always be somebody doing something better than you in some way. So the whole issue of contentment is, jo hai mere paas utna kafi hai. Actually, it's a very profound point. It's a very beautiful point.
Can I just break in between here?
Please.
So how would we become satisfied and progressive at the same time?
No, there's nothing to on that. Yeah, I mean, there's no specific comment about progressiveness, because he talks about discipline. This whole thing is a matter of discipline, right? So if indeed you have been given, your this life's destiny is to do a certain kind of activity, then there's nothing to say that you should not be doing it with earnestness and sincerity. That is for sure. But as far as possessiveness is concerned, you can certainly draw the line at some point. You can draw the line. I don't need that BMW. I have a car which is good enough. I have a house which is good enough. If I look at that guy, he's making 2 crores a month or whatever it is, but we also know that he's unhappy. He's gone through a difficult life and different. So if we are able to cultivate that kind of a thing, that we really, there's no end to that cycle of wanting, then we can cultivate that. And again, contentment in the sense of santosha that he says, do what you're capable of doing to help others without, and this is where the Bhagavad Gita thing, comes in very strongly again and again, the motif. If you are not attached to the results, what I'm saying is nothing that you have not heard before. You obviously heard it. He talks about that. If what you're doing, which is intended to be good for someone, is not colored by your desire to be recognized and getting acknowledged, then you're also fine. Santosha will happen to you. So just do your work sincerely without any expectation of end rewards. Kehne ke liye aasan hai, but we know it's very, very difficult, because the ego cries for attention all the time. You will see many times, if someone actually done something, if somebody has donated money to a temple, they put their names over there. Ki maine donate kiya hai. So it's a dichotomy, or it's a dissonance that you are seeing. So there's nothing which says that.
Again, I'll digress a little. And in your book, the word ego is mentioned many times. And you attempted to explain it, but for the benefit of our audience, after writing this book, how do you define ego?
Yeah, it's a strong sense of identity and uniqueness, which of self. Ki main kuch pata nahi koi special cheez hu. There's something extraordinary about me, and I am God's. Somebody has God has sent me here because main bahut unchi cheez hu. And it is a sense strong. And the problem is that society, the world, social order promotes that feeling of individuals' excellence as well. of uniqueness. It does that. The signals are there. I mean, if you think about us, our families and so on, they always said, be first, do well, you must succeed, the competitive spirit. So and whenever you did well, they congratulated you. If you didn't do well, you had those kind of things. So the sense of ego, the sense of uniqueness has always been promoted as, that you are unique. Or when we look at our, Janam Patri, oh, you're going to be a great guy, etc. So all the signals promoting ego exist constantly around us. And now suddenly at a late stage in life, you realize that we have been misled by all that. And that is the reason why we are perpetually unhappy. We're always unhappy because, our ego is never satisfied. So that point about Santosha is mentioned very clearly as the niyama, one of the niyamas. So pehla ang hai, asht matlab 8. Yama, social behavior. Please observe the structured way in which Patanjali moves from outside to inside. Pehle yama, outside. Niyama, in the mind, basically behavioral traits, being content, etc. Now comes the issue of asanas, which is the maintaining the body, which is the popular interpretation of yoga, right? Now, why should we bother about the body? I'll come to that because there's a very important reason why. So the third one is the asanas to keep yourself fit and make sure you're doing fine, etc., so that there's no issue. And there are many interpretations of that. Incidentally, in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali talks about the asanas in only 2 lines. Only 2 lines speak about the asanas. Basically, and in which he says, in fact, you get into an asana and be still. So it's not exercise, it's not gymnastics, it's not calisthenics. You get into a particular pose and learn how to be still and comfortable so that your breathing remains steady. Okay, so that is how you should be doing asanas. Yes.
So can I ask you, how Patanjali Yoga Sutra is different from Vipassana?
Vipassana, now we come to the meditation part, right? So the third, as I said, is the body, asanas. The fourth is pranayama, which is about the breath. We're getting more and more subtle now. From the outside world to the mind, to the body, and now of the body, we're talking about the breath, right? And so how do you manage your breath? And in fact, he talks about the first sign of a disturbed mind is irregular breath. So the breath contains secrets of life in that sense. And there are many other he talks about. So the more you actively work on reducing your inhalation, exhalation, your body becomes more at peace, and so on. So lots of stories about people suspending their breathing for days and weeks together. The fifth is pratyahara, which is called the withdrawal of senses, which is the last final frontier, so to say, as you slowly start trying to discard your ego, your sense of identity, right? Your eyes mislead, your ears mislead, your skin misleads, everything in which you interface with the world is again telling you that you're a unique person. So that also has to be slowly jettisoned. Okay, so that is the last physical frontier. To answer your question about Vipassana, I'll come to that in just a second. Now we move inward. Okay, so I will take, let's see, ye mere paas ek pencil aapko dikhai de raha hai. So now we come to the last 3. So they call dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Dharana is, I am looking at this pencil while being fully aware of the context around me. There is a screen in front of me. Dr. Tushar Agarwal is looking at me or talking to me. There is a book over here. There's some papers here. I'm sitting on a chair. So while I know that I'm looking at this, I'm trying to cultivate single-minded attention to the pencil. It's still intermittent. It's still irregular. I'm still aware of my surroundings. The next becomes when I'm no longer aware of the surroundings. I'm fully focused completely. And that's what we say, Are dhyan rakho, dhyan karo, these are the kinds of language which have entered a lexicon and we haven't even thought about where it came from and what it's all about. So dhyan is you're completely absorbed in that particular element, whether it's a cow, whether it's a tree, whether it's a computer, you are essentially communicating only with that object or person. That is what the dhyan is. And finally is the actual thing when the distinction between that object and you is gone. That is called samadhi. So as far as Vipassana is concerned, of which I'm not an expert, please note that to do dharana and dhyana for long periods is part of the meditative process. That's how you meditate. You meditate, keep trying to think of something, whether it's a candlelight, whether it's a person, whether it's a karma, somebody's karma. He gives many ways in which you can meditate, right? But the point is about Patanjali Yoga Sutras. you can't suddenly say, "Acha, chalo, main jaake meditate karta hu." It doesn't work like that, right? Unless your body has been and mind has been tuned from the first five, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara. They have to be tuned dhire dhire karte karte. Then you become ready for meditation. And therefore, I mentioned to you, the asana part is actually very important for that reason. If you're going to be meditating on whatever you're meditating on for extended periods of time, you have to have a fit body, right? Otherwise, if you suddenly say, "Chalo, मैं meditate करता हूँ, 2 minutes के बाद this is fidgeting, this is paining, गले में दर्द, पीठ में दर्द, अरे अभी नहीं होगा, So that is what the whole idea here is, that you get your mind and body and everything, all the moving parts in that sense, ready, so that the vehicle can function perfectly without any kind of a distraction. I hope you're getting my point. So that is why if you look at Vipassana, if I'm not mistaken, again, I'm not done it. I know it's a 9-day program, etc., etc. I understand that after please.
So there are these Western literature which, ride the wave of very short-term meditation, like a 10-minute meditation or a 1-minute meditation. So as I understand from you, is that that's not really going to be the classical meditation. You already have to be in a meditative state in order to really try to do that 1-minute meditation.
I believe so. I mean, but I'm not looking down at it. What I would look at it in a slightly different way. At least people are willing to try out 5 minutes, 10 minutes. In those 5 or 10 minutes, they will see a benefit in its own peculiar way. You obviously will not reach some kind of spiritual heights, but at least you were able to catch your breath. At least you were able to do a little bit of introspection for 5 or 10 minutes. That's a start. But the meditative thing that we're talking about, it is samadhi going on for days, weeks, months, usi pe lage raho. And we have seen so many examples. People are found in caves after centuries. They're still meditating. You're saying something.
So I would like to think that I have read a lot and I know a lot. Okay, I may not be practicing regularly. But when it comes to, very difficult matters, still the reflex action can be suboptimal.
Yes, sure. Agreed.
So how does one really, is there, like after having written this book, for the benefit of our audience, can you tell us some practice which they can do in day-to-day life in order to minimalize this reflex suboptimal reaction? I'll give you an example. So let us say there is an irate patient or a patient's relative who is speaking in a very, very
abusive
unwarranted, disillusioned and abusive manner. And then at some point you break down and then you start reacting in a similar way. And then hell gets loose.
Yeah, there's no end to it.
So what is the way that you can endlessly just control yourself and prevent that reflex burst?
Right. Lovely question. And I will answer it in the following way. So along the way, Patanjali talks about karma. Okay. So this is a very interesting thing because there are two sides of it. Your ability to control your karmic baggage accumulation and also observing somebody else's karma by his behavior. What I mean by that is as follows. So he says, in effect, along the way, that sorrow comes disguised as happiness.
Yeah, I read it.
Yeah, which is a very interesting point. I'm sure you'll find it, right? Because the minute you feel happy, whatever the feeling of happiness is, you crave for it again. You want repeated experiences again and again. And when you cannot have it, that makes you bitter and sad. Very interesting, a beautiful point, if you ask me. Right?
I'll give you an example. Okay. So one of our pathologist friend, his son got into IIT Bombay.
Acha.
So what can be a bigger joy than that? 1 year down the line, when I meet and I ask him, sir, kaisa hai aapka beta? Maja maar raha hai pawai mein. Means what I'm trying to say is the same source of joy of getting his son into IIT Mumbai is now no longer a sense of joy for him, like what you said. So the most joyous things ultimately can lead to a lot of displeasure and unhappiness.
In fact, they will for sure, because you always want the applause, you want the satisfaction, somebody you like, you can't beat that person again, whatever it is. but it's all disguise. So that is one. So it's issue of karma. So therefore, when you seek happiness, you create new things. You act in certain ways, and therefore you have to work out the karma either in this birth or a subsequent birth, as per our philosophy. So having said that, as far as my behavior as an orthopedic surgeon, I'm not one obviously, but I'm putting myself, let's say, in orthopedic surgeon's shoes. I am now faced with an irate, a patient.
Client, patient.
So I look at it as how this is very deeply philosophical, maybe even impractical, but we have to try. Is that I cannot right now afford to create new kind of karmic things, and I have to think of all of this as an illusion that's happening. I have to do my part. Now, keeping that particular thought in mind actively is very, very difficult, but I think it gets better with time. So, for example, now I'll come to the second point, which then the first point will make even more sense. Taking this into consideration, therefore, when you see angry patients or relatives of patients, the way you can think of is they are acting out their karmic baggage, or they're creating new ones. It's a kind of a distance you can try to create between yourself and them. So their behavior will be rewarded in some way in the future, or they're actually going through what is necessary right now because of past actions. So therefore, you can even have a little bit of empathy for them if possible. Now, this is asking a lot. It's not that easy, right? So therefore, when you do that, you can see yourself at distance, Dr. Tushar version 1 versus Dr. Tushar version 2. And the version 2 is saying, this will also pass. With time, this will pass. Let me not react and start saying things which will add to my karmic baggage. Now, they're big words, not that easy at all, right? If I'm angry, then there will be consequences. So once I start thinking like that, so how does this work in real life? I mean, I don't have patience, but you see an angry person. This has happened to me quite often. You meet angry people. Now I've started thinking that, oh, okay, so this person's behavior can be attributed to a legacy which he or she has received over the years or so on. Not a philosophical thing, but it helps, because by not reacting, you actually end up diffusing the situation to some extent. The minute you react, that is going to cascade into spiral into a situation which both of you are going to lose control. And this is also an example of emotional intelligence if you think of it. Right? You're aware that
in your book, you have mentioned is the best thing that you can do in a situation is to not react.
Yeah, which is difficult.
Which does not mean that you are indifferent.
No, it doesn't mean that. It can be empathy, or it can be a sense of time will also pass. Let me just hold on. What will I gain by saying it? For example, if I say something really nasty to you, the pleasure will be some sadistic happiness that you are hurt. That's all. Beyond that, there is, what am I going to get out of it? So I think we have to cultivate these kinds of thoughts and philosophies about our interaction with the rest of the world, right? And that helps us take it through. So, for example, even the issue of money, right? So we have again been tuned and trained through our childhood that we must make money, And it is an important thing. In fact, Patanjali also talks about it. It's not that he says shy away. He said, in fact, it is a duty of a man or a woman to make a living, because all these spiritual activities can also be sustained in that sense. So he doesn't say ki nahi karna chahiye. But the question is a sense of, how much is enough, and why am I discontent just because that person has got more. So you can develop some barriers of kind of a framework of thinking that it's fine. Jo hai mere paas theek hai, I really don't need so much. But it's very difficult. It's very difficult because there's peer pressure. There's all kinds of other, societal and pre-programmed impulses which are forcing you into predictable behavior, right? Which you have to fight against. And that is, again, an interesting thing. You're a doctor, you have seen those things about, sports psychologists. They say that when you're running a race, it seems that the moment I say that I'm tired, you've read this, right? It apparently is only 40% of what you can actually do. You can actually go forward. So the mind is your first enemy. In that sense, it's first pulling you down. So similar, aisa kuch hai na, I think so. I mean, you know better than I. So similarly, so therefore, so if one day I get up, I'm just not in the mood, yaar, aaj to yoga na kare to acha hai. What will happen if ek din nahi kiya maine? And I immediately recognize this is my mind pulling me back. And that specific day, I'll get up and do another 10 minutes more. Okay, you can master these. Okay, you can recognize these little shadows in your mind which are causing negativity and pulling you down into behaviors which are not going to help you in the long run. Okay, so this is what I wanted to say with that. Maybe it's a long answer to your question, but this is my...
Quickly, you will complete the other two parts of the chapter. You told
Sure.
us about the first two.
Correct. Samadhi pada, sadhana pada. The third one is like risks and rewards. So the way I can, in your language, if there is a what do they call it, a procedure or a protocol you may have for treatment, I think that's what it's called, right?
So how
I'm sure along
good results and complications.
Correct. Wohi cheez. So the third one is oftentimes called, people talk about it as black magic. Okay, in the sense that in the third section, he says that a true yogi who's advanced, who's done all those 5 things, yama, niyama ho gaya, asana kar rahe, pranayama ho raha hai, and he's learned how to do this, he will develop certain kinds of unbelievable powers. The mind has become so powerful that it can help you to walk on water, it can help you to transcend geographies, it can help you to go through space. It might sound like, it might even sound like nonsense to so-called practical people like us, but the mind apparently is capable of these kinds of things, right? But, and this is an interesting analogy, he says those are exactly the kinds of powers that you should guard against, because that is not the intent of yoga. So that is what the point is. Okay. So just say you butter churn karte hai na, when we do the makhan ka. So the thing which is outside is the makhan, which is very interesting, which is what we like. I've got this power, it's tasty, I can do so much stuff, etc. But the unappetizing liquid in the middle is the real deal. So again, it's a risks and reward kind of thing. It's a fascinating section, which again is saying, as you become powerful, and this is a very classic thing from our own point of view, is the more you're successful in anything, the more you are fertilizing your ego. Okay. So because awards are coming, recognition, wow, what a doctor, he's great, kahan se pata laga rahe, sab aapki baat kar rahe hain. So those kinds of signals, whether we like it or not, is actually going into our heads and making us vain, making us, feel proud of our recognition. I'm the only guy, I'm ek village se hai, ab meri shaan dekho, mere paas ye, the dialogue from Zanjeer, mere paas ye hai, wo hai, makaan hai, tumhare paas kya hai, that kind of thing. So he says basically that these are the kinds of powers which have the ability to distract you, because you're likely to be saying, wow, I can walk on water, I can conquer time, mere jaisa koi nahi hai. And that's that your journey of yoga comes to a grinding halt, or decelerates, or actually regresses. Okay. And then the final thing is a final kind of an executive summary of all the philosophies that he talks about, including a mention of time. How to imagine time. And the way that you and I have classically felt about time, that there is a past, there's a present, there's a future. He negates it. He says that's not the case at all. All time, because we need that construct to make sense of our lives. I was young, now I'm old, and tomorrow I will die. So we have to have those kinds of a linear way of looking at our experiences to explain why we're doing what we're doing. But he says there is no concept, there's no such thing at all. It's just, time is just a series of tiny, it's flowing like water, and there's no past, there's no present. Everything is contained in the same moment. So a few more esoteric philosophies are in this last very short, paragraph called the Kaivalya Pada, which he ends in a very, very beautiful way. He actually says somewhere on the third or fourth last sutra, he says something to the effect that you will enter something called Dharma Megha Samadhi, where you finally get it, whatever that is that you're going to get. And when you get it, all your knowledge, all your experiences, your karmas, kleshas, everything becomes irrelevant. And then you're essentially merged. So that's a kind of very esoteric, beautiful thing. So that's how it is.
Basically, it is coming to terms and being comfortable with irrelevance.
Yes, beautifully said.
I think that is the most important thing. That
which is very difficult.
What you do ultimately get into terms with irrelevance.
Correct. And it is very difficult, Dr. Tushar, because wherever you go, people say, "Arey, mere ko wahan pe certificate milega, mere prize milega." So we have been programmed to do exactly the opposite of what is actually in our best interests. And therefore switch gears and say we are fundamentally irrelevant is a very sobering thought and kind of a deflating, but probably necessary as well.
So while we are in the act or preparing for an activity, we have to act with relevance. And then, irrespective of the outcome, I think we have to say it was irrelevant.
Yes.
So it is
And
a
let me,
simultaneous relevance and irrelevance.
yeah, quite so.
Because if we
Let me
start off saying that it is irrelevant, we may not be able to put adequate effort into the whole process.
Right. One of the a philosopher has said exactly your point earlier is don't teach these things to young people too soon. Otherwise, they will lose the zest for life itself. You have to. And in fact, he says it like this: give them an objective to strive for, something to achieve, and when they achieve it, they should be prepared to sacrifice it. Okay, which is very interesting.
So I was reading a little bit on Ashtavakra Gita, and they said that do not label any act. So this act is good or this act is bad. We don't have the power to label them. And I asked ChatGPT that is this correct? How can you say that? Okay, this act it doesn't matter. So ChatGPT says as per Ashtavakra Gita, it is right. But Ashtavakra Gita is a text which is read at a higher spiritual level. The person is already understanding a certain level. So, it's like when you're reading a final MBBS text, it is different. When you're reading a first MBBS text,
First year.
yeah, it's different. So you can't be digesting information. Everybody can't digest information which is meant to come later in the early phase. So,
Quite so.
So we are sort of 4 minutes away. So I had asked ChatGPT, okay, there's so much about Patanjali Yoga Sutras that you're talking. So give me some doable tasks. Ultimately, we have to give doable tasks to people. So they said setting specific goals and breaking them into actionable steps. Right? So if you want to succeed in your career, identify smaller milestones and the skills that you require and work towards achieving them. Creating a structured routine. So like you said, discipline, means prioritizing your task and doing it in spite of every reason not to do it.
Every reason not to do it, correct. Yeah.
And practicing time management, again cultivating discipline and regularly self-reflection. And seeking support and accountability. So these were few of the actionable tasks. So I would like to take your final comments. Like if you have a bunch, let's say we had a live audience of 100 orthopedic surgeons, of various age groups, and you are definitely an authority on Patanjali Yoga Sutras as you have written a book. So for surgeons who are men of the world, who are dealing with patients, who are dealing with so many things, what will be the 1, 2, 3 things which you will tell कि boss ये book लो, ये पढ़ो और आप ये सीखो.
So whatever I'm going to say is not original. Original in the sense is not something that people wouldn't have heard of earlier. He starts with Yama, which with the very first Yama he actually says is ahimsa. Now, we're not saying people are rushing around bashing up each other. That's not the case at all. But the whole issue of cultivating a mindset of non-injury by word or deed can be cultivated slowly by us. So people say, I'm very blunt. मैं कुछ भी बोल देता हूँ. I don't think these are compliments. One must be very careful and must be actually kind in what we say to other people. So actually consciously being aware that words can hurt. Can be one. The second thing was obviously the second which you talked about earlier was the issue of santosha, of contentment. Again, very difficult because peer pressure, other kinds of things are always making you unsatisfied. That guy's a CEO, मैं CEO क्यों नहीं हूँ, उसने ये किया वो नहीं किया. And one other thing he says of having very little, of not wanting to be rich. Now, this is a very interesting thing in which he says a person who gives away everything. Okay. You worked a lifetime and you accumulated stuff, for example, and now he says, give away everything. It is of no relevance to you. How he puts it is a person who doesn't have anything and doesn't want anything actually attracts more riches, both material and non-material. That's because he doesn't see any value in those things. Therefore, people trust him with other kinds of things. They will actually make you president or chairperson or, give you money, whatever recognition, etc. So there are a few things. I mean, I'm just giving you these 3 things. One is the issue of ahimsa. Second is to actively cultivate, contentment, which is again very difficult to do. And the third thing is actually having a spirit of what's the word I'm saying? Irrelevance accompanied with the thing of being philanthropic. That I have this, I've accumulated this in my lifetime. Mere jaane ke baad it will continue with me somewhere. What did I get? It's not going to go with me. This is nothing new in what I'm saying. So, jo hai, try your best to give it away and live with as little as you can. Very, very difficult in practice, but certainly.
And I feel these three things can come if we continuously meditate on them.
Quite so. Quite so.
And
so the issue of meditation should be yes.
And consistently meditate upon them. It's not going to be very easily done otherwise.
No, not at all. But you must follow the process. Don't start meditating, ki aaj by 5 minutes meditating. Please understand the sequence. Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah.
So, one last question is, there are some people whom we never see meditating. And they always do the right things. Like what you said, all the nice things, the right things, they attract the right things. So how will we explain that? Is it because of the past karmas that is happening?
Yes, I think that is ultimately the case. If you think about it, why is that particular person who is poor and yet quite happy and always is smiling around? It's a joy to be around that person. So they are lucky that their karmic baggage is of a particular quality and variety where they really don't want anything. I have a Veena teacher, a very elderly lady. I'm learning the Veena also. Okay, so she's a very elderly lady. Frankly, she's very poor. Very poor. But she's always smiling. Her music is beautiful. And when I have conversations with her about music, they're very rich, lovely conversations. And she smiles when she talks about it. Now, isn't she very lucky? Isn't she very fortunate that, that wealth didn't come her way because she didn't need it. She was wealthier in a different way altogether. So, yeah.
Can we achieve this?
Yes, I think it's achievable.
This sense of contentment.
I think it's entirely possible. There will be these flashpoints. There'll be the pivotal moments in your life when you suddenly realize, but everybody has their own journey. For some, it can come at the age of 30, it can come at the age of 80. Where everything suddenly seems irrelevant when you look back and say, what the heck was all that about? What did I just do? Why did I behave so stupidly then? What explains it? I think these things are possible. I hope everyone has those flashes in their lifetimes.
Right. I also happened to read one of your other books. I began reading it, How Organizations Really Work. And I think it's a brilliant book. I'll suggest to our audience, especially those who are running hospitals, they may love to read that book. So the current book that we are discussing is Yoga Sutras Simplified. Guys, it's available on Kindle. It's available on Amazon. You must have a copy. It's a very, very easy read. You could probably go through it cursorily in a day, right? Since we are exceeding time, thanks a lot, sir, that you were here. I'll just briefly summarize. You could correct me if I've got it wrong. That the three key features is that we learn to be kind. We don't hurt anyone. We learn to be content at all times. And irrespective of whether we achieve to our heart's content or not, we should understand that it's probably eventually going to be irrelevant.
I think you summarized it beautifully.
It's going to be irrelevant. So I think whenever we summarize with more than 3 points, it creates confusion in the mind of the audience. So being kind, being content, and knowing that ultimately whatever we are doing is probably not going to be as relevant as we feel it's going to be. So with these 3 thoughts, I'll request everyone that please purchase the book, please get the book and, contribute to our discussion. It's on YouTube. You can leave messages. You can let us know. If you have anybody specific in mind whom you think we should interview on OrthoTV Monday Motivation, do let us know. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for joining us this evening. Thanks a lot, sir, for taking your time out.
My pleasure. Wonderful discussion. Thank you so much, Doc. Very nice talking to you. Bye-bye.